Good afternoon to our audience again. Great to have you with us again here live from the SOC at InfusionPoints. Again, I've got the trusty team and the men behind all the madness and the magic here at InfusionPoints. Brief introductions. I got Mr. Joshua Winters with us today. Again, he's on the All Things POAM for us. Mr. Josh. Mr. Anthony Gwines, deployment lead, is with us today as well. Anthony, how you doing?
Good.
Good deal. Jeremy Powers, the InSOC lead, is with us as always. Sir, how you doing? And then we have Alex Erdhart with us again, Tier 2 analyst here at InfusionPoints. Alex, how things going?
Good, man.
And then also live from the SOC today, we have Mr. George Gamble. George, how are things?
Going well. How's everybody?
Love it. Appreciate you joining us today from this. Appreciate you holding the SOC down as always. So thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So today for topic of conversation, we're going to be talking about, IOCs and alarms, kind of centered around our FedRAMP and DFARS customers as well. But also it kind of encompasses all of our customer set here at InfusionPoints and what we are particularly seeing from the SOC. What are some things of importance, high level things that we see continuing to trend upward out of the SOC when it comes to our customers' environments, and really some of the things that we bring up to our customers on a consistent basis of, hey, we need to be looking at this and we need to figure out ways to rectify, remediate, and or ensure that you have a strong security posture around some of these IOCs. So to kick things off, we're going to talk about some of the alarm sets and things that we're seeing. So George, again, coming from the SOC, you and Alex, I'm going to pull both of you guys here. Feel free to jump in. What are some of the top alarms and things that we're seeing come into the SOC right now here at InfusionPoints?
We see a lot of account lockouts.
All right, a lot of account lockouts. Alex, what about you?
Thing I see most on every customer is phishing.
Phishing. So account lockouts and phishing. It almost sounds like those two things kind of go hand in hand nowadays. I know that we continue to see phishing alarms. Jeremy, I know in the past we've worked some pretty sophisticated phishing attacks and those things that are coming in. And the threat actors out there are getting so crafty with those. It really takes me back to a statement that I've made time and time again to our customers, and anytime when I sit down and talk to an audience, and I think it's worth bringing up to this audience here today. I believe, and guys at the SOC, please, you guys are in the field, you're seeing this from a daily basis, so jump in here. But we kind of see three attack vectors or three vectors that are truly leveraged for that initial access into environments. And so with that being number one, in no particular order really, but first being kind of vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities that are getting exploited out there. But then pivoting off, we've got phishing that you guys just mentioned. And then from the phishing as well, we also see kind of the password spraying and things of that nature, right? Just guessing passwords, brute forcing, whatever. I kind of lump all those together. But it's interesting that you guys bring up that we're seeing a lot of phishing and then account lockouts, George, because that kind of hits on two of those three vectors, right? And what's interesting also around those vectors is, how many of those vectors actually truly involve the IT team themselves? Looking at it, we only really have one, Josh, and I know that, you being all things POAM here, that vulnerability management piece. But, by and large, that is the only thing that, administrators can really have control over, right, is patching that system.
Absolutely.
And so they have control over that, but then these other vectors and the two that you guys just brought up are the things that we're seeing hit high on the list. They involve the end user and that kind of human element. And I know, Anthony, I see you nodding over there. Phishing, when it comes to penetration testing here at InfusionPoints, kind of social engineering, if you will. You guys are leveraging that. Tell us a little bit about some of the phishing and different attack vectors that, how you're leveraging that here at InfusionPoints and how you see the threat actors even leveraging it.
Well, it's interesting because, it doesn't matter how tight a network is, how secure it is. I mean, we all know the weakness is going to be the human element, no matter what. And so that's one of the things we use in the pen test is even a simply crafted email sent out with a link to a legitimate looking site. I mean, it can fool people. I mean, we all get emails so much today. I mean, Symantec just released a report that said 1 in every 4,000 emails in 2020 was a phishing.
Wow.
So, I mean, you think about that, and as many emails as we get a day, and as many emails as there, I mean, that number is crazy.
Yeah, well, and that statistic there, it's pretty alarming. And I know that even throughout 2021, even now going into 2022 here, George, I know I've seen you put out notifications, even for us here at InfusionPoints, of phishing alerts and emails and things that we've seen hit our filter, and you guys are catching in the SOC and alarming on those. Who do you typically see those coming from, George, within the organization?
Usually from the CEO.
Oh, yeah. I've seen time and time again that the CEO here at InfusionPoints, Gary Damer, is sending me an email and coming from a Gmail account or something like that, and it's absolutely crazy. But it's crazy that folks in their day-to-days, as Anthony mentioned, being just busy and inundated with emails, how they could fall subject to that. So you guys catching that in the SOC and stopping that from being delivered to the mailbox is pretty pertinent. Talking about that other attack vector a little bit there, we mentioned, in George, you mentioned account lockouts, right? That's going to go hand in hand with the password spraying and those types of attacks. Brute forcing is kind of almost it's still around. You guys see that every now and then in the SOC as far as alarms go. I think you guys have told me a little bit, and it's been reported up that we'll see that, a lot of times from like SSH hosts and things of that nature, brute forcing. But password spraying, you guys often see that when it comes to today's environments for our customers that you're monitoring? And where are you seeing those come from, those password spraying attempts?
All over the world.
Well, yeah. I think with the push to O365 and cloud services like that, we continue to see the uptick in that. What about this one, which is one that, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people get confused about. They've heard it, and I think that they just smile and nod that they truly understand it. But credential stuffing. I know when I heard that the first time, I was just like, oh, yeah, credential stuffing. I know exactly what that is. But, until you started really researching, let me just break it down for our audience exactly what that is. It's nothing more than taking open source information that's out there that could be out there from anybody's given account and just retrying those credentials. So breach information out there. How many of you guys have seen breach information being leveraged nowadays?
Well, I know. I think people don't realize how much breach data is actually out there. I mean, recently we downloaded a collection of breach data, and it's like 500 gig of strictly Word documents zipped up of just username and password.
Wow.
So these are compressed, and it's still 500 gig of data.
Yeah, so it's just straight text, 500 gig, and that we've been able to pull down, and that stuff's sitting out there on the dark web. Really, you can pull it down from the regular internet and leverage that information. And so, with that, we're seeing threat actors again just try kind of those just replaying of those creds. Hey, we all know that, as mentioned earlier, that the human element piece, folks are just subject to reuse passwords and things of that nature.
And I mean, you don't have the password spray if you already know what the password is. So I mean,
yeah, it's very true. And then weak passwords all the time. Josh, I think we've been in some situations together where we've seen the use of weak passwords. What kind of weak passwords have you seen out there? Several, or for our audience, often used, and people are astounded because it meets all the criteria. But I know there's a few out there. What do you got?
Absolutely. Some of the more popular ones is like you'll just take like the spring or fall or winter, and whatever year it is, and then slap a special character on the end of it, and you're meeting a 8 to 12 character upper lower number and a special character, and most of the time when you put that in, down at the bottom, when you put your password in, it'll tell you, is this considered a strong password? And yeah, that's considered a strong password because it meets all the criteria, but it's really not. I mean, password crackers, they're going to tear that up in minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that goes into the pen testing. We use there's a website, weakpasswords.com, and that's literally 90% of those are the whatever date, the month.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at how many doing pen tests, how many actually have the word password in it.
Yeah. So for our audience out there, what's a website that they could go to check and see if their information has been leaked out there? Speaking of that credential stuffing.
One that I like is have I been pawned?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I've leveraged that in the past. I think from Have I Been Pawned, you can actually put your email address in there, and it'll look for that information. But then you can also put your password that you're using in there, and it will look and see if that's been leaked out there in the wild. And I think that's important for our viewers to understand as well that, hey, look, if that password has been used and it's been leaked out there, just scratch it off the list, move on. We far too many times see folks reusing passwords that are just out there in the wild. And so, it truly creates a lot of alarms. It's one of the top kind of IOCs from a password spraying and, threat vector that we see for that initial access. But George brought up a good point, the account lockout piece and feeding this back into, our main customer set here at InfusionPoints. Those FedRAMP customers, the DFARS customers who have strict AC controls around them, and us managing and monitoring those customers and reporting this information up. Jeremy, for our accelerator customers that are in these FedRAMP environments, what exactly are we monitoring and how are we handling that from an account perspective?
Well, we're monitoring everything from AD. All AD logs are coming in, but the biggest takeaway from the AC is the failed logging. Not only that, we monitor firewall logs and stuff. So then if something's on the edge of your system, like SQL injection wise and stuff like that, we're monitoring for that. So that's covering, going back to what we were saying earlier, vulnerabilities. We're monitoring and have alarms for all that. Passwords are changed or anything, we're monitoring for that. So that would be passwords, cover your password spraying. And then for phishing, that's the reason you have, that's the biggest reason, going back to what Anthony was talking about, how the human user element's the weakest component. So that's why the AC or access control family is one of the biggest, I consider it one of the heaviest hitters, because that way you're monitoring everything that every end user inside the environment is doing, like whether their passwords change, if they've even just logged into something. For example, you might have some user you've never seen log in, and for some reason they're logging in at 12:30 on Sunday night. That would, even if it's just a legit login, that would be very suspicious. So that's why we not only monitor for failed and password changes, but just you need to monitor for successful logins too.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of times a lot of customers will negate the fact of, well, I don't need to see the successfuls. But there's a lot of behavioral analytics that go in there. George, I know I've talked with you in particular on a few cases where we see these failed authentications, but what's some of the things that you're looking at when those logs or alarms come into the SIM itself for a failed authentication? How are you handling that when that alarms?
Well, we'd like to see what's causing the alarm to lock out. So it could be day-to-day activity, numerous failed logons.
Right. So the end user, if it's, checking to see if it's regular daily activity, I'm hearing, and then I'm sure you guys are looking at the source of where that's coming from and that nature. What about scripted attacks? We talked about password spraying. I know that we leverage a lot of scripting around that. So if it's some type of scripted attack with password spraying, what are you guys typically seeing there?
We would see 2,000 logins in 3 seconds.
Okay. So logins or
failed login.
Okay, so failed attempts, and then possibly a successful or something like Jeremy was stating, right?
Yeah, you'd usually see that at the very end of the logs.
The threat actors gotten a lot more advanced too, and that's why the behavioral monitoring has become so important, because in some instances you'll see maybe it won't alarm, because if you're set to lock an account after 3 failed logins, some threat actors are now savvy enough to do it slow enough to where it won't trigger an alarm.
Yeah, that you bring up a good point there. Going back to monitoring those successfuls, man, there's so much information that can come from those successful logins, because the technology out there, yeah, it's going to alarm on potential failed logins over and over and over again. But once they have access, or they have a legit password, or they've successfully phished it, successfully sprayed it, what's monitoring the activity there? And so that's why it's so important, the fact that we're collecting all those logs. So going back to your point there, Jeremy, I really appreciate that. So,
yep, and that leads into you were talking about what kind of alarms we see. One that I see when I'm doing MSIs for one customer in particular is one called Anomalous user behavior, which is, you've got 2 logins in a very close proximity of time in a geologic location that shouldn't be possible.
Right.
You'd have one login in Florida, and then 30 seconds later you've got a login coming from Texas.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that with that impossible travel, if you will.
Yep.
As the system alarms on that. So, Josh, you brought up a good point there, and one of the things you brought up there, I want to hit on, and for our audience, you brought up an acronym, MSI. So, what exactly does MSI stand for? What is that?
Absolutely. Our MSI is our monthly security index, and what we do is every month we try to go in and give the customer an overview of their environment. These are the alarms that we're seeing. This is the traffic, the highest use, stuff like that right there. And if you keep that information month over month, what that allows you to do is you can go back and look at it, and you say, okay, this customer generally sees 30 tickets a month. Well, then you've got this month comes up and this customer jumped up to 150 tickets. Well, then that's going to make you stop and think, well, we need to dig deeper into this. Why are we getting more tickets this month for this customer? Could be a misconfigured something on the firewall that's causing a false positive alarm, or it could be something more sinister.
Yeah, definitely. I know from our MSI reporting and things that we push over to the customers, Jeremy and I have reviewed those at length, and a lot of the reporting goes back to those control families for those FedRAMP customers and the DFARS customers. So again, the AC families, and it really helps out at audit time as well to be able to have that report, show the auditor, hey, look, month over month we're doing that. Alex, we talked a little bit about that in episode 1. How you're constantly working on the reporting, so it goes back to that. So I appreciate that. Well, guys, listen, we're running tight on time here. I really appreciate everybody joining again today. I want to thank our audience for joining us on episode 2 of Live from the SOC. As always, I appreciate the Tier 2 analyst there, George Gamble, bringing us live from the SOC today. So thank you, sir. We will pivot off, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe.